The sirens screech before the lights even hit her face. Blue and red, flashing against the cracked sidewalk where she stands clutching 2 bags of groceries. The plastic handles cutting into her weathered brown hands as she blinks in confusion at the 3 squad cars suddenly converging on her like a pack of wolves circling prey engines, rumbling radios, buzzing with static and coded jargon. A scene that feels more like a raid than a routine check in the sleepy morning hours of a Sunday in East Ridgewood, Georgia. The streets are quiet, too quiet, save for the occasional rustle of paper in the breeze and the slow, shuffling gait of elderly Loretta Mayfield. 76 years old, retired schoolteacher community matriarch, known by every child and every parent within a 10-block radius for her warm banana bread and the stories she tells on the porch. Her small frame wrapped in a pale blue church dress, her gray afro neatly tucked under a matching hat, gold-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, a slight hunch in her back from decades of service. Her eyes filled with the kind of knowing patience that only time and struggle can carve into a person. She doesn't understand what's happening not yet. As 2 officers approach her, one tall and buzz-cut, the other stocky with mirrored sunglasses, hiding his eyes, both of them white. Both of them moving with a mix of aggression and certainty, as if they've done this 100 times before. And maybe they have, but not to her. Not to Miss Loretta until now. "Ma'am, stop right there," the tall one says, hand hovering near his belt, the other holding a clipboard with a photo that's clearly not her. A younger woman, slimmer, no glasses, a different face altogether. But Loretta doesn't even get a chance to speak before the stocky one steps forward and says too loudly, "We've had reports of suspicious activity from someone matching your description. Shoplifting, possibly armed." And Loretta blinks, confused. Then tries to explain that she's just come from Simmons. Market has the receipt in her pocketbook. Would they like to see it? She teaches Sunday school at Mount Hope down the road. Perhaps they've made a mistake. But her words are soft and get swallowed up by the static on the officer's radio and the rising thrum of fear in her own chest as the tall one says, "We're going to need you to put those bags down, ma'am, and keep your hands where we can see them." And her heart starts to pound. Not just because of the injustice, but because this isn't the first time something like this has happened to someone who looks like her. And she remembers the names Sandra, Brianna, countless others' names that echo in her bones. Names that make her shoulders tense as she slowly, cautiously sets her groceries on the sidewalk. Apples rolling out and a carton of eggs cracking on the concrete. Her pride breaking with them as people across the street stop and stare. A teenage boy pulls out his phone and starts recording while another shouts, "That's Miss Loretta." What the hell are y'all doing? And the officers don't respond. Don't even glance up, too locked into the rhythms of power and procedure to question what their eyes refuse to see. That this woman, this black grandmother with a gentle heart and a spine forged in civil rights marches, is not a criminal, is not a threat, is not the nameless shadow their training has taught them to suspect. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. The tall one orders, and the handcuffs click louder than the morning bird song as they snap shut around her wrists. The cold metal biting into her skin. The plastic bag with the crushed loaf of bread still swinging from one elbow. Her body trembling, not with resistance but with humiliation, and somewhere deep inside, a fury builds not just for herself, but for every black woman who has had to smile through disrespect, who has had to lower her voice to be heard, who has had to carry generations on her back while being treated like less than nothing by those who don't know her name, who don't want to. They shove her into the back of the cruiser without reading her rights, without offering water or decency. Her hat knocked sideways, her glasses falling into her lap as the teenager filming follows, shouting, "I'm posting this. Everyone's gonna see what you did to Miss Loretta." And still the cops don't flinch, confident in their immunity, certain the system will shield them. But what they don't know is who Miss Loretta really is. Not just a grandmother or a former teacher, but the widow of Charles Mayfield, the first black city councilman in East Ridgewood, and a close friend of Mayor Denise Holloway, who happens to be the goddaughter she helped raise after Denise's mother died, and who happens to be watching the video go viral by lunchtime, already at 3 million views, and counting with hashtags exploding across social media. Justice for Loretta, Black, Grandma Harassed, East Ridgewood Shame. By the time they process her at the station, someone has called the press. Someone has called the mayor, and someone, namely, the new interim police commissioner Alicia Reynolds. A black woman with zero tolerance for misconduct is already en route, her heels clicking furiously down the hallway as Loretta sits in a cell, head bowed not in defeat, but in prayer, whispering scriptures through cracked lips. And when the door bursts open and Commissioner Reynolds enters with the mayor and 3 lawyers in tow, the officers' smug faces fall into ash, their authority unraveling before their eyes as Denise cries out, "Aunt Loretta, oh my God," and rushes to her kneeling before the cell bars while Loretta lifts her chin, grace still intact despite it all. "They thought I was someone else," she says simply. And Denise turns like a storm on the officers, shouting, "She's the reason I'm standing here today. She helped raise half this city. You racially profiled an icon, and now you're going to answer for it." And the press cameras catch every moment. Loretta being gently walked out, wrapped in a mayoral blazer, the 2 officers being suspended on the spot, the police commissioner's firm voice declaring a department-wide investigation into racial bias and immediate implementation of body cam accountability. The city erupts not in violence, but in collective sorrow and rage. Church bells ring out in protest. Neighbors rally around her home with flowers and apology letters. The market owner offers free groceries for life, and Loretta, sitting back on her porch a few days later, with her hat fixed straight and her glasses glinting in the sun, reads from one of the many cards left at her gate. "You taught my daughter to read. Thank you for everything." And she smiles, not because justice was perfect, but because it was loud, because it was undeniable, because in the end dignity stood taller than hate, and the truth burned brighter than the lie. And maybe, just maybe, the next officer will pause before assuming the next child will speak out, before silence settles, and the world will remember that no one, no matter how old, how black, how humble, should ever be treated like they don't matter. Ban Jun Noi Viet Them Fan Tiep Theo Chat GPT Jun Noi. And so it doesn't end with an apology, it begins with a reckoning. The video of Loretta Mayfield's wrongful arrest continues to surge across the nation, sparking outrage, not only in East Ridgewood, but in cities far beyond, igniting candlelight vigils and town hall forums in communities where elders once walked invisible and unheard. News anchors debated. Radio hosts rage, and social media floods with portraits of black grandmothers holding signs that read, "I am Loretta." National outlets descend upon her humble porch cameras, trailing every word as she speaks, not with bitterness, but with fierce, unwavering grace. This wasn't just about me. This was about every elder who paved the way only to be pushed aside when we're no longer convenient to remember. We're not suspicious. We're sacred. The power of her voice draws crowds. High school students march in her honor, carrying roses instead of slogans, chanting her name not in protest, but in praise. Civil rights leaders call her a living monument. And all the while, Loretta watches with the quiet strength of a woman who has lived long enough to know that change does not come with shouting alone. It comes with showing up again and again, no matter how heavy your heart or how cracked the pavement beneath your feet. The mayor officially declares the following Sunday Loretta Mayfield Day, and the local church overflows not just with congregants but with city officials, police cadets, journalists, and even the children of the very officers who once cuffed her. Commissioner Alicia Reynolds personally delivers a plaque inscribed with the words, "To Miss Loretta Mayfield, Educator, Elder Truth-Teller." Your dignity shook the walls of silence. But perhaps the most powerful moment comes quietly near dusk, when the same teenage boy who filmed the original video, Jalen Thompson, 17 hoodie zipped, high eyes wide, approaches her porch with trembling hands and says, "Miss Loretta, you don't know me, but I know you. My mom said you taught her how to spell her name. And I want to be a journalist now because I saw what truth looks like when you catch it in time." Loretta, moved beyond words, places a gentle hand on his shoulder, squeezes, and says, "Then promise me you'll never stop looking for it, even when nobody's watching." Behind the scenes, the officers face disciplinary hearings. The city council fast-tracks, reforms mandatory anti-bias training, elder rights protections, community review boards. Loretta is asked to serve as a special advisor to the police department on race and community trust. She accepts not for power, but for purpose. And when she walks into that precinct, head high, hands steady, dressed in a deep navy suit and brooch, shaped like a dove, officers rise from their seats, not out of fear, but out of respect. She walks the same sidewalks now, but not alone. A mural rises near the corner where she was arrested. Her likeness, painted with outstretched arms, surrounded by books, sunflowers, and children. The caption reads, "They tried to handcuff her, but she unlocked the city's soul." And late at night, when the streets grow still and the wind rustles the oak trees outside her window, Loretta Mayfield leans back in her chair, listens to the world breathe and smiles. Not because the fight is over, but because this time they listened. This time she was seen. Weeks pass, but the ripple of what happened to Loretta Mayfield refuses to fade. It grows louder, deeper, until it becomes something bigger than even she imagined. Universities invite her to speak. Civil rights panels want her on stage. Children across the country write letters that arrive daily in torn envelopes with hand-drawn hearts and words like, "You remind me of my Nana," or "I want to be brave like you." The city, still reeling from the shame, now holds her up as a symbol of truth, a symbol they once ignored. But Loretta doesn't let the praise turn her soft. "Don't make me your mascot," she says calmly on national television. "Make me your mirror." One afternoon, Loretta receives a formal invitation in the mail. The White House, a special ceremony honoring voices of justice. At first, she laughs and shakes her head. "I'm just a church lady with arthritis and opinions," she mutters. But the invitation includes a handwritten note from the president herself. "Your voice reminded the world what justice sounds like." A week later, Loretta boards a plane for the first time in 30 years, wearing a lavender blouse, her Sunday shoes polished to a shine, and her heart full of both pride and disbelief. She is greeted on the tarmac by an aide who says, "Everyone inside has been waiting just for you." The ceremony is grand, but it's what happens afterward that stirs the nation once again. During a private press conference, a young reporter asks Miss Mayfield, "What would you say to the officers who arrested you now?" She pauses, looks directly into the lens, and speaks not with vengeance but with unshakable clarity. "I'd say, I hope you learned. I hope you understand what you did to me. And I hope next time you pause. Not just for someone like me, but for someone unlike me too, because prejudice shrinks the soul and justice. It stretches us wide enough to see each other again." The quote goes viral again. But now, so does the action. Thousands of cities begin adopting the Loretta Pledge, a community-driven promise by officers to de-escalate, to respect elders, and to undergo racial bias training under direct community supervision. Schools introduce new curriculum, including her story as a case study in modern civil rights. A scholarship fund is created in her name for students pursuing social justice. Meanwhile, back in East Ridgewood, Loretta returns to what she loves most, sitting on her porch with sweet tea in hand. Children gathered at her feet as she tells them stories not of her pain, but of her power. "Once upon a time," she begins, "a woman like me was mistaken for a criminal. But the truth corrected the mistake. And it did so in front of the whole world." One evening, as the sun sets gold behind her tiny garden, a familiar car pulls up. A man in uniform steps out, one of the officers who arrested her. He approaches slowly, without cameras, without backup. He looks different, humbled, not hollow. "Miss Mayfield," he says softly, "I came to apologize again. Not with a press release, just with my heart. I left the force last month. I'm now working with youth outreach because you made me look in the mirror." She studies him quietly, then nods. "Good," she says. "Just make sure the kids know they matter before someone else tells them they don't." And as he walks away, Loretta exhales deeply, not with exhaustion, but with peace, because she knows now her story didn't just change a city. It awakened a country. The seasons begin to change, and with them the rhythm of East Ridgewood. What once was a quiet southern town now hums with new awareness, stirred by the voice of one grandmother, whose truth pierced silence like sunlight through fog. Loretta Mayfield, now affectionately known across the nation as America's grandmother, continues her life not as a celebrity, but as a living compass, gently, fiercely pointing people toward what is right. She doesn't crave the attention, but she understands the weight of the role history has handed her. So she carries it with grace even as her knees ache, and her mornings grow slower. Every Saturday, now young volunteers gather in her front yard. They repaint fences, plant flowers, repair broken porches of elders who can no longer do it themselves. It's called the Mayfield Circle, and what started as 5 teenagers has become a national movement. Teams in Detroit, Atlanta, Oakland, even as far as Anchorage, all working under the same motto stenciled onto the back of their T-shirts. Protect our elders. Honor their truth. Loretta watches them with quiet pride, always seated in her wooden rocker, her lap covered in a hand-stitched quilt made by a girl in Chicago who had seen her story and was moved to tears. Each time someone new joins, Loretta tells them, "Don't just do this for me, do it," so no other elder ever has to prove their worth again. Meanwhile, in Washington, lawmakers under mounting public pressure introduce a new bill, the Loretta Act. It mandates federal protections for elders during law enforcement encounters, penalizes racial profiling of seniors and allocates funding for restorative justice training led by the communities most affected. It passes the House with bipartisan support, and when it reaches the Senate, the final vote is held in a packed chamber, where Loretta, dressed in soft gold, and sitting between her pastor and the president, watches quietly as history shifts once more. Not with shouting, not with fists, but with votes and values finally catching up to conscience. The officers who arrested her are no longer on the force. One has become a speaker at police academies, his testimony raw and honest, reminding cadets that authority is not armor, it is responsibility. The other now teaches social studies in a rural town where he tells his students, "This badge doesn't make you right." Listening does Loretta, doesn't speak to them often, but she reads their letters. She believes in change. Not in forgetting what was done, but in believing people can do better once they know better. On her 77th birthday, the entire block shuts down. Neighbors decorate the street with string lights and old photos of Loretta from her teaching days, smiling with rows of children marching in civil rights protests, planting trees behind the church. A band plays softly. Children present her with handmade cards. The mayor arrives with tears in her eyes and a new key to the city. And just as the sun dips below the horizon, a little girl named Tasha, no older than 6, tugs at Loretta's dress and whispers, "Miss Loretta, when I grow up, I want to be brave like you." Loretta kneels. Despite her aching knees, takes the child's hand and whispers back, "You already are, baby. You already are." And in that moment, with laughter around her stars above her, and the warmth of generations before and after, encircling her like a halo, Loretta Mayfield finally lets herself believe that the world is indeed changing, and this time for the better. Months later, Loretta Mayfield walks slower, her steps deliberate but steady as ever. She no longer needs to carry protest signs. Her presence has become a symbol that does the speaking for her, but her mission is far from over. Across America, the echoes of her story have inspired school districts to reintroduce oral histories into classrooms. Universities establish annual lectures in her name. And yet the moment that touches her most comes one quiet afternoon when she receives a package wrapped in brown paper, postmarked from Montgomery, Alabama. Inside is a delicate yellowed envelope containing a letter written in tight cursive from a woman named Thelma Grant. Aged 91. "Dear Sister Loretta," it begins. "When I saw you stand tall after they tried to break you, I saw myself at 19 refusing to give up my seat in the back of a city bus. I never thought I'd live long enough to see a nation listen to a grandmother. But they did. Because of you." Tears wet Loretta's cheeks as she reads the letter, her hands trembling not from weakness, but from the sacred weight of connection. She picks up her pen and writes back immediately. The correspondence begins a quiet revolution of its own. Within weeks, elders from across the country begin writing to each other. Handwritten letters, phone calls, then Zoom calls, a tapestry of voices, black, brown, white, immigrant, native, woven into something breathtaking. The Elder Network, founded by Loretta, and funded by the very scholarship her story helped create. This network becomes a digital porch where wisdom is passed down like heirloom stories, once buried beneath decades of silence, now rise and bloom. But not everyone applauds the movement. Conservative pundits mock her on TV. "What does an old lady have to teach us about policing?" a local radio host sneers. This is just a guilt parade. America doesn't owe her anything. The mayor's office receives threats. Protest signs are defaced. But Loretta stands firm. At a press conference, she addresses the backlash with the calm thunder of a truth-teller. They say I'm just an old woman. But old women built this country. We nursed its babies, harvested its fields, taught its children, and buried its sons. If you think our time is past, then you haven't learned from it. And if you haven't learned, you'll repeat every cruelty your grandparents fought to erase. The room goes silent. The video goes viral again, 1 year to the day after her arrest. East Ridgewood hosts a citywide peace walk led by Loretta Over. 10,000 people show up, including veterans, families, pastors, atheists, activists, and cops in plain clothes. Loretta leads from the front, holding the hand of her great-granddaughter Amari, who at just 9 years old already writes poems about justice and rain. The crowd moves not with anger, but with a shared commitment to never go back to silence. Storefronts hang banners with her portrait. A marching band plays. A change is gonna come above them. Helicopters film the crowd stretching for miles. But what they capture most clearly is Loretta Head. High heart open, walking not as a victim, but as the woman who reminded a nation of its soul. That night, back on her porch, under string lights and stars, Loretta opens her journal. She writes a single line. They meant to break me, but they made me eternal. And she knows deep in her bones that when she is gone, the truth she stood for will remain passed down from porch to porch, from elder to child like gospel. Because justice once awakened does not go back to sleep. Years pass, but Loretta Mayfield's name never fades. It becomes a cornerstone etched into the new heart of a changing nation. Children in schools recite her speeches during Black History Month, alongside those of Rosa Parks and Fannie Lou Hamer. Her story is studied not just in civics textbooks, but in college ethics courses, leadership seminars, and police academies. Her porch, once a quiet corner of East Ridgewood, becomes a historical landmark, preserved by the state, visited by tourists who bring their children just to stand where Loretta once rocked in her chair, offering wisdom like warm bread to anyone who needed it. A bronze statue is erected just across the street in the town square, not of her raising a fist or holding a sign, but seated peacefully, hands folded in her lap, eyes lifted as if looking toward the future, titled simply Loretta, the grandmother who made America listen. But Loretta is still alive when they unveil it. Now, nearing 83, her hair whiter than ever, her voice softer but sharper with meaning. She is wheeled onto the platform surrounded by mayors, governors, pastors, and children she once taught, who now bring their own little ones to sit at her feet. She smiles at the statue eyes glistening, then leans into the microphone. I didn't change this world by being special. I changed it by standing still long enough for truth to catch up. You don't need power to be powerful. You just need to know when to say enough. The crowd falls silent, then erupts in applause so thunderous it shakes the birds from nearby trees. Among the crowd is Amari, now a young woman standing tall in a blue dress, a journal clutched to her chest. She's just been accepted into Howard University on the inaugural Loretta Mayfield Scholarship. When interviewed by a journalist afterward, Amari says with tears in her eyes, "My great-grandmother taught me to turn pain into purpose. That's what I'll do." Loretta lives to see Amari give her valedictorian speech, lives to see a documentary made about her life, win an Emmy, lives to see her story inspire a Netflix series, a Broadway play, and a children's book titled Loretta's Porch. She lives long enough to know her fight was not in vain. But time, as it always does, begins to slow her down. One winter evening, the lights in her home glow soft. The quilt over her lap is the same one that's traveled with her for years. A fire crackles nearby. She gazes out the window as snow begins to fall. The first flurries of the season. The world is quieter now. Better not perfect, but kinder. She takes a slow breath, closes her eyes, and whispers, "You can rest now. Charles, we did it." Loretta Mayfield passes peacefully in her sleep that night, surrounded by family, her Bible resting on her chest. The news spreads within hours. Flags are lowered. Cities light their buildings gold in her honor. A national moment of silence is observed. Her funeral is attended by presidents, artists, children, and officers alike, but the most moving tribute doesn't come from the stage. It comes from Amari, who steps forward, her voice trembling but proud, and says, "My great-grandmother didn't just survive injustice. She transformed it. She taught us to see the human heart beneath the badge, beneath the fear, beneath the skin. And she taught us to never forget who we are." As her casket is lowered, the crowd sings, "This Little Light of Mine." And far above, as snow falls gently onto her beloved town, a single light flickers on in her old house left on forever, by city ordinance to honor the grandmother who lit a path for them all. And so it ends not in sorrow, but in legacy. Loretta Mayfield may be gone in body, but her spirit now lives in every hand that reaches out instead of judging, in every officer who pauses before acting, in every child who dares to speak truth with grace. Her story is no longer just her own. It belongs to a nation she helped wake up. A nation that finally understood that dignity has no age, no color, no title, just presence, just truth, just a voice strong enough to whisper enough and make the world listen. Across East Ridgewood and far beyond, murals of Loretta bloom on brick walls. Scholarships bear her name. Grandmothers now walk a little taller. Children speak her name in their bedtime prayers. And when injustice tries to rise again, as it always does, it finds a wall of memory of community of people forever changed by the quiet courage of one woman who never asked to be a hero but became one anyway. And now, dear viewer, it's your turn to carry her light. If this story moved you, if you believe justice begins with listening and legacy begins with courage, please take a moment to support our channel. Like this video to honor Loretta's story. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another powerful voice like hers. Turn on the notification bell to stay with us as we share more stories that speak truth, demand change, and heal hearts. And in the comments, tell us, who is the Loretta in your life? We want to hear their story, because storytelling isn't just entertainment, it's power. And together we can build a world where no grandmother is ever treated like a suspect, but always seen as the treasure she is. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing. And thank you for keeping Loretta's light alive.